Hey, it's Max. I've finally got aboard to Australia's second best city, Sydney. This is my Lego rendition of their Tangara T Set, double-decker suburban electric train, etc, etc. As usual, these are all renders made using Studio, and I've not built this in real life. The Tangara is often regarded as Sydney's worst train, so naturally it's the one I gravitated towards when deciding what I should design next. There are a number of other trains I could have gone with, but I also have history with the Tangara that I wanted to finish. It is with said history that we start this journey. Way back in the ancient times of 2019, I was messing around with train base plates in Studio, and thought I could make a decent Sydney double-decker with this one. I couldn't. But it did leave me on to make the still unfinished design, which I was quite surprised to rediscover a few months ago. There are some clear similarities between my new and improved version and this old one, but the 6-stud width was definitely way too narrow, partly explaining the unfinished cab and awkward bogies. Fast forward to a few months ago when I started the new version. As with all of my models, it started out with the dimensions of the train. During the early stages of the design process, I often make tweaks to the scale to fit in every detail I need to, and this time it initially called for odd-length carriages. Unlike odd-width builds, odd lengths are much easier to manage, but even so, even lengths are still the goal, and after a long back and forth I settled on an even length. To make the build more manageable, I broke up each carriage into 3 sections. The central section, where the double deck is put in double-decker, and the 2 side sections, where the doors, bogies and other equipment goes. The central section is a relatively simple construction, and draws from some of the ideas from my first design. For instance, the curved windows at the top are made with the same pieces. Inside the section, I've neglected to put in stairs because I'm not entirely sure how I could make them fit symmetrically in the tight space, so that might be a thing I add if I ever make an interior. The central section is an odd length, but you may remember I said the carriages are an even length. This is where some of the quirks of the Tangara come in. The Tangara train is weird in the fact that the carriages are not symmetrical. The double-decker section of the train sits to the side, meaning that the ends of the carriages are different lengths. The way I have replicated this isn't entirely accurate because of piece constraints, but I've done my best. Now the side sections. Each one has a door and whatever this is meant to be. You can see the asymmetry here in the panels next to the doors, where I have made one side a stud shorter than the other. The roof is made up of a few sections, all stemming from the ceilings of the sides. The Tangara, like most other trains in Sydney, has a fairly dramatic slope leading up to the top of the roof. To replicate this, I used a similar technique to my Extrapolis 2.0's base, just on a greater angle. Unfortunately, I had to make the panels 2 studs tall and wide, which creates a gap and is bigger at this scale than the real-life counterpart would be, but this system enables me to have these grates along the side, and it lines up with the curved windows better than other designs I tried. The top of the roof is thinner than it should be because of the large side panels, but when I tried a wider, odd-width roof, I found it difficult to make it fit, so I had to go with this design instead. As with all of my models, the roof is designed to be removable, although I don't know how well it would work, and as a result is not connected to the central section, instead resting on the part of the curved windows that stick in. The roof is neatly capped off at the ends of the carriages. The base of the train is one long slab with a cutout for the lowered section in the centre. There is a slight curve on the bottom of the train which I have made with these curved pieces. These pieces come to a half-plate thickness at their ends, which is the perfect height for these snot tiles around the bogies. It might have been more accurate if I extended these panels further down, but I think it looks cleaner this way. This brings me on to the bogies, which are certainly an interesting one. They might look a bit weird to you for 3 reasons. Firstly, because the wheel diameter is way too large, but I can't really do anything about that in Studio. Secondly, because I haven't added any additional detail to them. And lastly, the gauge is smaller than a standard Lego track. At the scale I've built all of my models so far, 1600mm broad gauge is approximately equivalent to standard Lego track. This is fine for my Melbourne trains because all of them run on this gauge, while the Sydney's trains run on 1435mm standard gauge track, which is in between standard and narrow gauge Lego track. I'll go more in depth when I finally get around to rebuilding my B class, but the standard gauge basically means the Lego track equivalent needs to be 1 stud thinner than normal Lego track, hence the narrower bogies on the Tangara. That has been an overview of the 2 non-control motor cars in the centre, but there is of course still the outer 2 driving control trailers to cover, and as you would expect, these outer carriages come with cabs. Leading up to the cab is a cab door and an angled window panel. I've made the angle using these slope pieces, which unfortunately means I couldn't actually put a window on it, but I've done the best job I can, and the design is bulky enough without it because of these half-stud offsets needed to create the smooth line. The Tangara has 2 cab types. One of them is the regular T Set, which is completely flat and looks like cheese. The other type are the XG sets, which turn in towards their base and look a little bit less like cheese, but still like cheese. I didn't have a specific one in mind when I started designing the cab bit of the cab, but one thing led to another, and the easiest course of action was to create the T Set cab. Getting everything to attach seamlessly was a nightmare, so I've just made the entire wall rest on these angle bits at the bottom, but in the process of doing that I've actually forgotten to attach these bottom sections. But I'm not going to fix it now, and who needs them anyway. The transition to the roof at the top of the cab is a bit messy, but you can understand what's going on, which is what matters. And of course, in true mass production fashion, the cab windows are way too slim. The last element I designed, and the last one we will look at, is the pantograph and its surrounding area on the roof. The cutout for it is relatively simple, not much explanation is needed. The pantograph itself is once again a modified version of my Extrapolis 100 pantograph. The original pantograph's arms were way too long and wouldn't be able to be closed in the cutout, so I had to shorten them. Lego doesn't make the one length bars I would have needed, so I worked around this by using an older design idea I had that uses cut flex hoses. And with that, I think I've covered this model fairly comprehensively. But wait, there's still a minute left of this video. I wonder what that could be for. For all of you Melbourne fans out there, I've done it. That's right, a 3-minute reskin of the Tangara into the most inaccurate 4D I could have done. The main differences between the real Tangara and the 4D that I've neglected to do anything about are the completely different dimensions, and from what I can understand, the 4D characters are actually symmetrical. The 4D also has a G-set style cab, but who cares about that? The modifications I've bothered to make include the obvious livery change and wider bogies for the aforementioned gauge difference. I might revisit the 4D in the future to make it more accurate, but I think I'm done with Tangaras for now. The 4D does, however, give me a great excuse to put it up against my other models and show you how off-scale all of them actually are. My 4D has the same dimensions as my Tangara, and the real Tangara is only slightly taller than the Extrapolis, for example, and the same width. This is clearly not the case with my models, but hey, they look good and that's what really matters. As usual, I'd like to thank Tassie for his wonderful contribution of going out to Sydney specifically to take pictures used in this video. You can find a link to his stuff in the description. Thanks for watching, see you next time.